Well, let's start with the narcissist's false self. The narcissist's false self, as you all know by now, is grandiose. The narcissist seeks to maintain his inflated fantasy of himself. The narcissist denies, slices, and splits off. He evacuates or projects onto other people emotions, cognitions, thoughts, traits, impulses, behaviors, and qualities that contradict his false self, contravene his inflated, grandiose sense of himself.
Narcissism is, at its basic definition, the inability to separate or distinguish the self from the external world around it. This is why narcissists believe the world revolves around them. In their experience, it does. They have none of the boundaries between themselves and the outside world that the rest of us have. They are like very young children in this way. You only see that failure in really young children and people with disordered personalities. Narcissists have nothing to give you. They are focused solely on themselves because their inability to distinguish the self from the external world dictates that all things flow to and from the self. The self is the world, and the world is the self. And the world is the self. This is where all their projection and delusional thinking comes from. This is where every problem they have stems from. Even when they seem to be focusing on others, they're not. Examination of the focus nearly always reveals that it's the self rather than other people. It's kind of like a man driving a horse. The horse is pulling a very heavy cart loaded up with bricks up an endless hill. He drives this horse day and night, never letting the horse stop or rest or sleep or eat. He whips the horse continuously, making it pull and pull and pull. The horse finally drops down dead under the strain, and then the man stands there scratching his head, wondering what was wrong with that lazy horse. He figures it must have been defective and goes and gets another one, which he proceeds to treat exactly the same way. When that one dies exactly the same way, he assumes he got another bad one and starts all over again. This is how pathological narcissists treat human beings, like they are machines with no feelings. Push this button, the machine does one thing. Push that button, it does something else. Your suffering means nothing to them, except when it relates to themselves.
Well, let's start with the narcissist's false self. The narcissist's false self, as you all know by now, is grandiose. The narcissist seeks to maintain his inflated fantasy of himself. The narcissist denies, slices, and splits off. He evacuates or projects onto other people emotions, cognitions, thoughts, traits, impulses, behaviors, and qualities that contradict his false self, contravene his inflated, grandiose sense of himself. As I said, the narcissist has an inflated sense of himself. But to maintain this inflated sense of himself, the narcissist must ignore or deny certain emotions. He must ignore or deny certain thoughts. He must ignore or deny certain traits, certain impulses, certain behaviors, certain qualities, which contradict this self-perception as brilliant, as godlike, as perfect, as omnipotent, as omniscient. It's hard to maintain this concoction, this piece of fiction, this narrative that is called the false self. So what the narcissist does, he takes all these things that contradict his grandiose self and he throws them out. He projects them onto other people. Says, it's not me. It's not I. I'm not weak. I'm not stupid. I'm not out of control. It's not me. It's you. It's other people. In the idealization and evaluation phases, the narcissist projects onto other people positive traits when he idealizes them, or negative traits when he devalues them.
Pathologically narcissistic people are the blame-shifting masters. You can ask them a simple question about whether they took the trash out or not, and suddenly it's a 2-hour diatribe about how you make them feel so worthless, or how controlling you are, or how bossy, or how you won't give them any peace. Or maybe you'll get frozen out with cold silence, or be the subject of passive-aggressive comments, looks, and gestures for the next 3 days. It doesn't matter what the subject is, what the circumstances are, or how it happened. It's not the narcissist's fault. It's your fault. Even if it's nobody's fault, it's your fault. Even if you weren't there. Even if you weren't involved. Even if you weren't born yet. It's your fault. Even if they've been acting like this their entire life, and you've only known them for the past 2 years. Doesn't matter. It's your fault. The reason for this is very simple. Pathologically narcissistic people cannot accept blame. The idea that they have done something wrong, have a flaw, or have made a mistake is unacceptable to them, and they will do whatever they have to do in order to prevent themselves from having to believe it. If they have to lie or twist things completely, they will do so. Unfortunately, because everybody on the planet makes mistakes and has flaws, this means always needing somebody to blame. Pathologically narcissistic people are possessed by the idea that perfection is the only measure of worth. If something's not perfect, it's worthless. This includes themselves. The problem with narcissistic people is existing in a world where you can never be right because the narcissist can never be wrong. They are unable to create their own self-worth or self-esteem. It has to come from or at the expense of someone else.
narcissist, there's a further complication. The narcissist feels omnipresent, ubiquitous, all-pervasive. The narcissist believes that he is the prime mover and shaker. He believes that he is the cause of all things. He believes that he is at the core. He is the engine. He is the be-all and end-all. The narcissist is also convinced that everyone is exactly like him when it comes to negative emotions and motivations. So, for the narcissist to project is pretty easy, because he believes that everyone is like him, so it's not a problem to assume that they are envious, they're full of hatred, they're full of rage, they are all like him, then it's easy to project onto them these negative emotions, negative traits, negative thoughts, negative impulses, urges, desires, and so on and so forth. The constant and facile projection of the narcissist's own traits, own fears, behavior patterns, beliefs, and plans onto others, this comes to the narcissist naturally. The narcissist is firmly convinced that he is the generator and regulator of other people's emotions, that they depend on him for their well-being, that without him their lives will crumble into grey mediocrity. He regards himself as the most important component in the lives of his nearest and dearest.